You're listening to Rstories, a storytelling podcast that elevates the lived experiences of Chicago's migrant and refugee communities. I'm Chris Shue, and along with my co-host Ali Toro, we'll share candid conversations with the inspiring individuals and advocates at the forefront of key issues affecting these communities, and we'll have plenty of fun along the way. Let's get started.
Welcome to our stories. I am Ali Toro, along with my co-host Chris Shue. We are hosting Payal Patel, who is a strategic communications expert with significant United Nations experience. She has also served as a U.S. delegate on the UN's Commission on the Status of Women. And welcome, Payal, to our Stories podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you are our second female guest. It's our honor to have you today. And we would love to use your background and your expertise and discuss for the first time in our stories refugee women and challenges in Chicago and this country, and how we can empower women, especially refugee women in Chicago and the United States. So we will delve into that issue and we discuss it more. But I would love to hear your a little bit about your background and also open the discussion.
Well, thank you. And thank you once again for the invitation to join your platform, which is absolutely amazing that you're doing this and sharing stories from the refugee and immigrant community. So for me, my background is primarily in strategic communications and crisis management, as you pointed out. But my passion work, my heart work really is centered around women's economic empowerment, gender equality, and uplifting, marginalized groups. And so for me, I've been involved with, first and foremost, UN Women is where I started my efforts with the United Nations, and that's the gender equality arm of the UN. And back in 2018 or 2019, I got involved with the local affiliation of UN Women. And then shortly after that, I joined the board of directors, where I worked to draw a lot of attention to issues and initiatives that are impacting women and girls, and that had a local focus as well. So there, we did a lot of initiatives to help keep women and girls throughout the city of Chicago safe. So we passed an initiative here in Chicago called Safe Cities and Safe Public Spaces, which is UN Women's flagship program. And then we also did a lot of fundraising for other major initiatives. After that, I joined the United Nations Association of Chicago and then became a UN Global Goals Ambassador for SDG 8. SDG is Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and I represent number 8. And number 8 is economic growth and decent work. So now my focus really has been intersectional, bringing together women's empowerment with a focus on economic empowerment as well. And that very much goes for especially women from immigrant, migrant, and refugee backgrounds.
Wonderful, beautiful. So maybe my very first question for you is, I know you are working empowering women. Regardless, we are in the United States, okay, but we are still have so many challenges in front of women. And for someone like me who arrived from third world countries to the United States, was a kind of another culture shock, because when you are in Iran, okay, you think, okay, everything is equal here, women and men, but the reality is different. It's still the power dynamic, the patriarchal culture is still here, and we can see women has more opportunity than women. And even my wife is from here, but I see the challenges for her to grow is much heavier than even my challenges as a refugee here. So when it comes to women refugees, it's significantly heavier and different. Okay, and I was a case manager. I remember, one of the culture shock. I had so many female clients that never work in their country, uh, based on their beliefs, based on their culture, and their expectation was only for their men. Then I had to hand a cash money at the airport, just $50 back then. I said, "This is your money. You cannot even you can spend it at your discretion. You don't have to give it to your husband." So it was a culture shock to them, and in first 90 days, I kind of had to force them that you need to go and work. Okay, and it was very, very challenging for them. And and other things I came across when I was a case manager, that there's so many female students, girls, they were so behind in education, and also, for example, I had a clients, they had twins, and culturally they send a boy to school, but the other, and we enrolled them both at the ninth grade. Okay, and it was, I we didn't know how to handle that situation, because we didn't have that much resources to help the girl, 9-year-old girl. For the first time, she was sitting at the school in the classroom. So there is so many, there is some non-profits, for example, Girls Forward. Okay, they established that non-profits to empower, girls students, refugee girls students. So you tell me, okay, what are the most significant challenges for refugee women, and what can we do now to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I think it's important for everyone to recognize that refugees are not a monolith, right? There are so many different communities and people coming from so many different places for different reasons. Displacement is happening for different reasons. Maybe, some groups are fleeing their countries due to conflict. Others could be due to poverty. And so their needs are going to be different, right? The women and girls coming from Afghanistan are not the same as the women and girls coming from Rwanda, for example. So what we have to first and foremost identify the needs of that particular refugee community, and then work to fulfill those needs as specifically as we possibly can. But if I were to make a generalization around one of the aspects that I do think is really something that we need to hone in on, and I think you hit on this, is the access to education. Every woman and girl who comes here, I think there absolutely needs to be a focus on giving them the tools, resources, and access to education that they specifically need. That means that classrooms need to have classes that have instructors that can then communicate with them in their respective languages and help them make the transition to the U.S. and the culture here. And it is very much a culture shock, like you said. I cannot relate to refugee women and girls because I am not of that background. I am the daughter of immigrants, though, and it's not the same for sure. But one thing I know is that there is definitely a level of culture shock that comes with it, even as a daughter of immigrants, because my parents immigrated here in the 80s, so they're fairly new. And I was born to two parents who did not speak English when they arrived here, or at least they didn't speak it well. And in our home, we predominantly spoke my native language. And so when I went to school, and I'm the oldest, by the way, so I'm the first to enter the school system, I had to learn English when I entered school, whereas all the other students already were speaking it. And so I was enrolled in ESL classes, English as a second language. And but even then, I had trouble communicating that I have to go to the bathroom. And when I tried to communicate that to the teacher, she kept telling me to sit down. And I was trying so hard to, form the words, but I didn't have the words. And then I ended up having an accident in my classroom. So, I think there are these challenges where you got to take into account people's barriers. And of course, over time, I was self-taught when I got home. My dad made it a point to speak to us in English while my mom maintained our native language at home. But we did a lot of assimilation, and we had to drop a lot of our cultural background to assimilate. And I think that we need to be mindful of those types of things, especially for women and girls, to make sure that we're accommodating their needs and we're accommodating their cultural background and taking those things into account when we're providing education access. And of course, education, I'm such a huge advocate for this because it is so important for them to be able to gain the life skills they need to advance in workplaces, to be able to have the skill sets to advance in the US and create better opportunities for themselves and their families. And data shows that when women and girls are educated, family planning is better, family dynamics are stronger, just the entire ecosystem and our economy fares better when women and girls are educated.
Yeah. So you mentioned your childhood experience at the school.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that similar to that experience we had an Afghan student in second grade. Then she kept leaving the classroom, and her teachers couldn't understand why. Okay, when they call a school counselor, and they called me. I went over there. I spoke to her. I said, "What's wrong? What's going on? You keep leaving your classroom. I need to sit." And she told me, "Now I get bored because I cannot understand anything."
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the teacher, even the school counselor, couldn't understand. They were not ready to work with refugee and immigrant students who cannot speak English. So there is definitely education, access to education. Also, there is so many systemic barriers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and many families arrive in Chicago. Okay, then they have to enroll their students within 30 days, and send their kids to the schools. And our schools are not enough equipped, okay, to help this type of students that cannot speak English at all, or this is the first time they sit in a classroom. They don't know how to behave. They don't know how to sit behind the desk or even hold the pen, or. So it's definitely is quite a challenging moment. Tell me, based on your lived experience. Okay, your parents immigrated here. Tell me about the first time when, for example, I don't know your mom ever worked or not. Okay, but for the first, no.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so yeah, this is my experience as well. Many of my at least former clients, the women didn't want to go to work, and we were forcing them. And we were forcing it, but at the same time we are promoting human rights, okay, diversity, culture, respect different culture. But the reality is, no, they have to go to work. Otherwise, they cannot afford their life. They cannot pay their rent. And I saw that because of the culture beliefs creates so many other stereotypes. Okay, reading that, hey, they are from that culture, they are from that religion, they are from doesn't work. And yeah, yeah. I guess I'm trying to ask you that how can we with the respect to their culture and beliefs, okay, and also see the reality in this country, how can we can empower them, okay, to take, for example, ESL classes or continue their education, or at least try to adjust themselves with their new lives in this country?
Yeah, I think that needs to be a part of the education system, right? That once they are enrolled, as you said, they arrive, are enrolled in the school program. I think that the schools and the education programs need to, have sort of this structure and guideline of here's what needs to happen. We'll enroll you into ESL class. We'll make sure that there's instructors there that speak your native language. And can translate and help you also learn English and other skills. And it helps when people are also of that particular background so that they can also help you integrate from a cultural standpoint. One thing that was very noticeable in my ESL class was that I was the only one of Indian background. And I was in a class full of Spanish speakers. And so there was that other element of no one in the classroom came from my own background, and I could not even find someone that can relate and help me transition. And so I think these things need to be, educators and like school programs need to be mindful that, okay, we have refugees or immigrants or migrants from these communities, they speak this language, they come from this cultural background. Let's make sure that we have educators or instructors, or, if they bring in tutors for the day that can help them with the transition process. So I do think that piece is certainly important on the side of the education system technology.
I'm not going to challenge you, but my point was for the moms and the adults. So because at least students or there is some sort of support. Somehow also kids, they pick up the language faster, easily, and also they face challenges definitely. Okay, they show in their behaviors, but the parents, the mom, okay, and honestly, I'm trying to find out. I don't have any solution for it. Okay, I'm just trying to hear other different opinions. Then, for example, okay, the mom. I met so many moms. They realized the reality of life here. They wanted to go to work, but the husband said no.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we support that group?
Yeah.
So please use your expertise with United Nations.
Well, so that's actually not an area that we've explored through my UN work yet, but I can relate to it in the sense that my mom was not a working mom in the traditional sense, right? She, of course, did housework and was, raising two children is work. Raising any children is work. So yes, there's that element, but culturally, she did come from this background where men were traditionally expected to be the breadwinners. They're the ones who go out there and work, and the women are expected to, be at home and do domestic work and, child rear and all of that and those responsibilities. And so I think a lot of that's rooted in the culture itself. There was nothing that could have been done if my dad, who was, considered the head of the household, and in many cultures the men are, was to say, you're not going to go to work. You're like our agreement when we got married, which is how my parents always frame it, is that they had an agreement when they got married that my mom would only do this and she would not work, in the traditional sense. So I think that's something that's probably it's incredibly challenging to overcome when it's so, rooted in the culture. I do think that tide is changing at least in the US. I think women, as they're becoming, and this is why it goes back to my point of education being so important, because it starts there. My mom didn't receive an education beyond primary school, right? In India, it's just not an expectation. They just don't go on to go to college and university, because for them, it's what's the point? Your next step is to get married and have children and then take care of the home. What's the point of going to college? Why are you spending that money? Why are you going to do all that? So I think for us, that challenge was certainly there. And now if girls go to school and they are encouraged to pursue higher education and pursue their passion and their jobs, then I think we're going to see more women enter the workforce, which is very healthy for the economy.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give I think a slightly different perspective, and then I'd love to hear your perspective, because I think we have to be careful with a couple of things.
Sure.
Right, we have to be careful with superimposing a value system on people who don't hold the same value system, and nor should they, because of culture and other things. So I think one of the things that I've, I personally, right, like my partner does not work outside of the home, and there's always, given the way the culture, at least here in the States, is, there's either an overt or an implied reason to justify that, right? Because it doesn't align with the prevailing narrative or expectations and assumed value system. And I think the thing that we have to be really careful with is, one, virtue signaling, that one thing is better than the other. Rather to say the real problem is if the only option is to be at home.
Yeah.
That is the issue. The issue is not choosing to stay at home and live your values and whatever those are. Those are beautiful, very sort of honorable pursuits. So I want us to be careful that is not to say that is a lesser pursuit. The issue is if that is your only option and there's systemic barriers to you exiting that is the issue.
Yes. No, thank you for that clarification. I meant to highlight the fact that women and girls should be given the choice, right? And in many cases, like my mom's case, it was not a choice. It was, this is what your expectations are. And I do ask my mom this question now, that if you were given the choice, would you have? And she's like, I think I would have. And that's what breaks my heart sometimes. I'm like, if you wanted to do something else with your life and you didn't give that option, that really, is disheartening. Of course, if women or men or, together as a family dynamic make certain choices, that's absolutely great. Yeah.
Totally. I would love to hear, I know you've done a ton of work and you've shared some of those stories that you've experienced in your UN heart work, as you call it.
Yeah.
But I'd love to just have you share a little bit of some of the projects you're working on or have worked on through the UN and providing really essential access to things and core resources to immigrant communities, refugee communities. So if you wouldn't mind to share a little bit about those projects you've worked on and what's come of that.
Sure. So I'll start with local. So with the United Nations Association of Chicago, we recently had a regional conference in which other UN affiliates in the Midwest region came to Chicago for a gathering in which we discussed the issues impacting the migrant and refugee communities here locally. Because as we know, over the past year or so, there's been an influx, and of course, Chicago is a sanctuary city, which is wonderful. But there seemed to be sort of a, yes, welcome, but we don't know what to do with you next type of situation. And that created a lot of challenges in the city. And so it was really wonderful to see a group called the Students Refugee Coalition, I believe, of Chicago, or I think starts with Chicago first. Sorry, Chicago Refugee Coalition, and it's put on by students, and it was so wonderful to see them come together and put together solutions for the city to take into account. And we just got the ball rolling on a conversation of how do we bring these folks in, welcome them into our city, but then set them up for success. Make sure that they have access to opportunities, because there's this misconception that, they don't want to work. Right? They just want to come here, and that's not the case. Many of them want to work. They want to contribute. They want to be a part of our city, our culture, our ecosystem. And these students came up with all these ideas of ways that we could create a pipeline to different types of job opportunities according to their skill sets. So we've been working with them to try to bring a lot of those efforts and initiatives to fruition. And then separately, as we mentioned earlier, I served as a U.S. delegate at the Commission on the Status of Women, which is the largest UN assembly on gender equality, and it happens every year in March during Women's History Month and specifically the week of International Women's Day. And I've been there 2 years consecutively now, representing the U.S. and being a part of a lot of these conversations of brainstorming ideas of how we can do even better. And yes, we're making progress, but it's still going very slow. And at the rate that we're going, we're looking at gender equality taking more than 300 years still to fully achieve. And that's because we do have a lot of systemic barriers that are embedded within our systems, from financial access, right? Financial institutions, the way that loans are being distributed. There's discrimination when you find out that the person that's asking for it is a woman. And it's not so much even the person, it's in the system. So when you apply for a loan, and this is something that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres actually talked about during one of the town halls, he mentioned that, he's come across couples where the one particular example he gave was that there was a man and a woman, and the woman actually made higher income, and they both went in and applied for a loan, or a rather credit line, and the man's was much higher than hers, and they went back to the bank and confronted the bank manager, and they said, oh, our system just happened to do this. And so it just goes to show, he was making this point to demonstrate that it's embedded in our system. So we're looking at, having conversations with financial institutions, with educational institutions. Women and girls are still, very much behind on STEM education because it hasn't been very accessible to certain, communities in some certain areas. And we're looking at, going down to even the basics of menstrual equity, which, involves making sure that period products are available in schools, which right now, not every school in America has free access to period products, which is, if you think about it, toilet paper is free, right? And everyone needs it. Well, girls need period products the same way that everyone needs toilet paper. And so, it's on schools and businesses and places of work and places where, anywhere with a bathroom, a public bathroom, should be able to provide these products, but especially in schools, and especially when refugee communities often don't have the financial means to go and buy them themselves in stores, and they're very expensive. So yeah, I think these are things that we need to be mindful of, and these are the initiatives that I've been collaborating with the UN on to bring to fruition.
Yeah. So now I have a question for both of you, actually. So it helped me to understand. That. So, and I mentioned it before, and on the one hand, in the United States, we are so proud of, many initiatives internationally. Okay, we are a big part of United Nations. Okay, and we are promoting human rights. Okay, we wrote the human rights for UN, because back then in 1946, that time, if I'm not mistaken. Then people come in the United States with different background, different culture, as refugee, migrant. Okay. On the paper, you're right. Okay, Chris, you're right. On the paper, it's about the choice. Give them option, then pick. But when it comes to society, I see it every day. People have reaction to refugees and immigrant population. Okay, they have reaction to the women. Okay, so because they don't want to work. Okay, this is their choice. Systemically, we are forcing them, you have to go to work. Because if you don't go to work, okay, you would lose your benefit. Okay, you would lose your rental assistance. Okay, you would lose your DHS benefits. Okay, you would lose, many things. So even for, I know Rebecca is sitting over there now. So even I recently learned about Illinois Action for Children. So they give them only 90 days for the parents to find a job. Otherwise they would lose their benefits. They cannot even use the Illinois Action for Children benefits. So yeah, how can you justify this disparity? Maybe Chris, you can tell me. So on the one hand, again, okay, we are so proud of all the diversity, human rights, culture, and on the other hand, we are forcing our values to different populations.
Right. Let me give a very direct answer to that question that I say as gently as I can. But you're asking the wrong question, because you're seeking to have the system prescribe solutions that are best reserved for individuals to make, right? So I think one of the things that's rooted in the American ideal that we do celebrate, it's inherent in our founding documents, is America's rooted in individual liberty, right? And that is the thing, right? So I think the question is not exactly how do we reconcile a system that requires people to work to earn benefits and the inequities that might present as it converges with their culture and their right to choose. But I think there is like an economic necessity that we have to understand, and ask ourselves, not how do we build a system that allows unlimited choice, because I don't think that's a feasible thing. But I think we have to ask ourselves is, do they have a choice to begin with? Right? So I feel like there really isn't. You could argue maybe there's an implied mandate for people to say, no, you can't stay home, husband, partner, whatever. You have to work to earn your benefits. And I think that's a policy question, right? We've seen that throughout various administrations. But ultimately, there isn't the federal government forcing people to do things, right? There isn't. That doesn't actually happen. People still have individual choice in this country, right? That is a true thing. They have freedom to choose. You could argue, does it create undue economic pressure? And I think that's a slightly different question that is actually addressed more from a economic point of view, job creation, job opportunity point of view, and less prescribing a federal program or a federal policy that will align these two things. So I think I get the question and I respect it, but I do think it is less about the RMP program or any other resettlement service that's providing a short-term window of support so that folks can sustain themselves in a short term. And it's actually, you're asking, how do they, one, have a choice for themselves, and do they have access to jobs? And I think it's actually more an economic question than it is a policy question. So I know that's probably a 4-hour episode on just that, but I do think we have to be careful with implying what is really inherent to the American ideal, which is liberty. And liberty really just means, can you create the life you want for yourself?
Absolutely.
So,
and I want to pass it really quick because because Payal has the economic background and spent some time on equity on economic issues, and we'll get to this, I promise. But just from your vantage point, and there's clearly a lot of work to do. I'm not minimizing that at all.
Sure.
But I do want to minimize that we can't prescribe solutions to every problem. But I think where we can, I think, focus on, if you provide access to economic opportunities, and do people have actually a seat at that table to choose where they go, that'll help elevate those things. But I want to make sure we get your feedback, because you're the expert on having worked on this economic.
Yeah, but I have a comment on your.
Yeah, go for it.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I was going to say, well, first of all, well said. And I was going to comment on, I was not aware of any forced labor policy. So thank you for that clarity, because I was like, I feel like that would violate some laws in this country. However, but I know that there are systemically issues that might give someone the feeling that I have to work in order to maintain this and be able to provide for my family. So there's certainly some of that exists. Now, from an economic standpoint, yes, one of the things I focus on with my work is actually ensuring that women, especially those who do want to work and have a passion of some sort, want to start a business, have access to capital funding, and have the resources and tools and assets they need to start a business, to be given the guidance on how to navigate setting up a business and setting it up for success. And unfortunately, there is a major disparity there. So, disproportionately, men tend to get more funding. And in the U.S., this is just the U.S. alone, the statistic internationally is actually a lot worse. So in the U.S., only 2% of women-owned businesses get capital funding. And so we're looking at the fact that a lot of investors are overlooking women for funding opportunities, and therefore starting a business is so hard. Now, data also shows us that women-owned businesses actually perform really, really well. And for those that want to participate in our, our economy, having women own businesses and create jobs and put their work out there, it's really, really good for our economy. So we're looking at how can we increase funding to women-owned businesses. There's a study out of Harvard that also shows that men prefer to be pitched by other men, and oftentimes the investors are men. So as they're sitting there being pitched, oftentimes they tend to feel like there's more authority behind a man presenting a business opportunity than a woman. And so again, these are maybe unconscious biases. Sometimes they could be conscious, but oftentimes they're unconscious biases because there's this perhaps this perception that there's a lack of competency or something of that nature. It could be true. So these were just some data points that came out of this study. And so we're now also driving, first and foremost, awareness around this issue, because we can't fix something if people don't know about it. And that's why, platforms like this and storytelling in general is so important. We can't be a part of the solution until we know what the problem is and that there is a problem. And so one, I think the first step is making people aware that this is the case. Also tying stories to it, because there are real life stories that I've come across through my work with the UN of some women having these incredible business ideas that they ended up having to shutter because they didn't have access to the right resources or funding to make that a possibility. And then the second step is then providing those resources, making opportunities available to them. So I think, step one, we're still there. We're still educating folks and letting them know that, like, look, this is an issue. It's still only 2%, and let's give women and girls more opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris.
Fire away.
Yeah. So you said this is not a government problem and this is a policy issue. Okay, so I disagree. I identify myself as a very progressive person. The second things, so that policy comes from our policymakers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it means from a body of government. I cannot understand that piece. We help people to come here, refugees, immigrants, and migrants arrive here somehow. Then we consider them as underserved community or low income families. Then we put the deal on the table in very ordinary language. You must work, otherwise in first 90 days, otherwise you won't receive anything from me. Okay, but at the same time, in the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, in the European style, okay, so they really invest on their newcomers, the refugee family. Okay, not only provide services, and also they don't put conditions to receive the benefits. Okay, they know the adjustment period is very, very challenging, very difficult, and then give them around 2 years, providing language classes, providing enough food. Okay, make sure they are not worried about their housing situation. So, but here, that policy is not only for refugees and immigrants, it's also for all people in underserved communities. You must work, otherwise, I won't help you. So what is the responsibility of the government here? So it's kind of unrelated to our podcast, but we are paying tax, we are working so hard because government is telling us, okay, I'm collecting your money, okay, because of my duties. Okay, so I serve you. Then when it comes to serving in underserved communities, okay, they put so many conditions for them, okay, and it's quite challenging for many migrant, immigrant, refugee families, especially again when it comes to the women. Okay, adjusting themselves. How many families get into trouble because of this type of policies. They realize like they cannot afford their life working. It's leaving their children at the daycare, okay, and going to work is against their values. They're against their beliefs. Okay, they suffer with severe feel guilty. I'm not a good mom. Okay, I heard that 1,000 times. I'm not a good mom if I put my child, okay, in the daycare, okay, and God won't forgive me because I'm not doing my duty. So we create more challenges, more issues. Okay, then on the other hand, we are so proud of women empowerment. We are here to support women. Men and women are equal. It was part of my job when I was handing the cash at the airport to my clients. I had to tell them by the regulation. Okay, I had to explain to them, this is your money. Welcome to United States. Okay, well, men and women are equal here. That's why this is your money. It's not your husband's money.
Well, let me, and I'll be brief here because I want to get. So it's okay. It's okay.
Wait, Payal, please help me.
It's
I will say I'm not very informed on policy, so
this isn't going to be a policy discussion, but I want to get it to the root, it's okay to have differing opinions. That is the hallmark of a healthy society, that you can have open and free discourse and disagree on the solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ali, you and I will have fundamental disagreements on the solution. I agree with you on the problem. There's clearly a problem, right? The problem, we've spent a lot of time talking on this. And just to recap for those who haven't spent the decade of studying it and the hours we spend talking and reading about it, is the RNP program, we'll talk about that, the resettlement placement program is rooted in one thing. It's air quote, self-sufficiency, which translates, get a job as fast as you can so you don't become a burden to the taxpayer, right? And that is a way inadequate system to integrate and support refugees. Loud and clear, that is absolutely true. It needs to be rooted more in education and identifying their skills and passions and providing true opportunity, not just a mandate to go work so that we don't have to subsidize your living any longer. We're lockstep on that. The thing that I caution about the way you're posturing that question is one of the things that you'll find, just from me, right? Because this is not a refugee issue. This is everyone issue, right? We don't agree that the government isn't the solution to all those problems, right? So that is where I'm drawing the distinction that the government plays a very important role, but there's a lot of other things that factor into that. And I think there's an equal responsibility that our business leaders play, that our philanthropic community plays, that organizations like Trellus play, to say that the government is always going to be lagging because it's a slow body that takes a lot of time to make very incremental changes, right? So understanding that constraint, in economics, you would call it the invisible hand, right? But the invisible hand isn't what drives the issues of supply and demand curves, right? Those are economic issues. So what I'm saying to you is give space for the economics of it, because I promise the policy piece will catch up when the economics make sense. And I think that's the case that we're making, that to provide capital funding to women-owned, women-led businesses is not only a good investment, because there's a ton of data to support the outcomes and the return on that, but it also leads to providing opportunities that address these systemic issues you're alluding to, and we don't have to wait on the government or the policy to catch up, because there isn't a law forcing people to work. Let's draw that clear. There isn't a forced labor laws in this country that says, refugee, you must work or you're going to jail. Right? But when you posture it that we're forcing people to work, that's not actually true. What we're really saying is the economics of it are forcing people to work. And what I'm inviting you to consider is, how do we provide more economic opportunity that really present actual choice, so that folks aren't in that position of, God's going to be disappointed in me because I send my kids to daycare and I'm not rearing my children as I should, right? Those are real constraints, moral and ethical issues that are best reserved for choices families make for themselves, by themselves. And we would say once the government has no business telling you which way to go on those issues. So that's a whole other conversation. And I'm just saying we're lockstep on where the issue is, 100%. But remember that, especially as we approach these things, we can sit and talk about the government's responsibility and the government needs to do X, Y, and Z, but we're ignoring the actual things that are right here, right now, that we can move the needle on. And those things are rooted more in our economics, our job creation, our economy than they are in DC.
Right. Yeah, I agree with your answer. Yeah. So yeah, I think part of it, part of my mindset comes. I'm from Iran, and all expectation is for government. And it's still after 12 years living in this country, my majority of my expectation is for government. It's hard. It's really it's very hard to adjust with the new culture, new system, and I suddenly were dropped in a very individualism culture.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's still after 12 years, my mind first shifted to government. Okay, government is the solution. So, but you are telling me government is not the solution. Okay, it can be part of the solution, but it's not the whole. Yeah.
I want to use, Payal, can we use a little bit of your professional expertise? 'Cause I loved as we talked about this, even in this conversation, it's a good way to build on it because clearly there's tons of passion. There's tons of passion in the work you're doing about educating people about the inequities in the women's lives all throughout the globe and here locally. But in your sort of day job and being a communications expert and dealing specifically with crisis communication, I would just love to hear just some of your professional experience in working in this, and also just to help give us some advice. We're practitioners in this. We work in this every day to help us communicate. Like, these are really big issues. And Ali, you rightly point out, people's lives are impacted every day by, shortcomings in the proverbial system that has systemic inequities in it. But how do you sort of step into that and say, yeah, we're here, and how do we communicate that effectively to help build a coalition that understands the issues and helps then move them forward as we seek to address them?
Sure. So first and foremost, I think at the very core of communications is storytelling. And so I'm going to go back to that point because I am a firm believer that there's great power in storytelling. And it starts there because, well, first, there's a statistic that people are 60% more likely to remember information, retain it, as well as feel compelled to do something about it if there's a story tied to it. And what we've been doing, even sitting here today and discussing these issues, making it a point to tie a story to our discussions and our points, right? That's what people are going to take away. Oh, the story about your mom. Oh, the story about you in the classroom. Those things illustrate the issue, right? First and foremost. And it helps people go, I did not realize this, and I didn't know it was this dire. Then that inspires and compels action. So it's one of the reasons I got into the field of communications, because I feel like we need more powerful storytellers that specifically paint picture around these major issues, these very critical discussions, and then help move the needle in the right direction as a result. And so I would say that's the first piece. And then with what I do in the crisis management sphere is once we've identified the crisis at hand, giving my clients and organizations that I work with, and a lot of them are nonprofits that are doing incredible work, the tools and resources they need to navigate some of these incredible challenges that we're facing. So one of my clients has been the American Library Association, and talk about storytelling. This is an organization that is comprised of storytellers and defenders of storytellers. So I was really excited to work with them. And, one of the issues that they're currently facing and have been for the past couple of years is censorship in libraries across the nation. And this has been growing year after year so far since, I want to say, 2020. There has been more and more and more censorship challenges and bans in libraries than ever in the history of libraries. And the very principle, at the very heart of what a library is and what it stands for is providing access to information to communities. That is their purpose. That's what they're there to do. And so now we're here contending with, communities that want to censor or pull back stories, right? The very thing that is going to help move the needle in the right direction. We have people in this country trying to pull those stories back. Now, why? Why are you pulling the stories back? Because you know they're powerful. You know they're powerful. You know they're going to have an impact. So the books that are being challenged and banned predominantly made up of stories by or about people of color, LGBTQ plus community members, immigrant and migrant communities. I mean, even stories outside of America, right, which are wonderful to know about other cultures so that we just are more equipped to, when we meet someone of a different cultural background, we have this knowledge and this insight. But when books like The Kite Runner, are being banned, and it's being banned because, it's pushing terrorism, terrorist ideals, and that misconception of a book about an Arab person, that's terrorism, so we're going to pull this book back. Or books like To Kill a Mockingbird is being banned. 1984 by George Orwell is being banned. So all these classics that I grew up reading in school that informed my thought process, that made me the person I am today, that shaped me, my values, are now being pulled from students, from young minds who should be given the choice. And the ALA's position has always been the information needs to remain there, and parents and guardians, in the case of minors, can make the choices for their families as to what material they're consuming, what they're reading, and not make that choice for an entire community. So I've had the pleasure of helping them manage this growing crisis, and we're doing that by storytelling. We're getting on to the news and talking about it, but we're also getting into the community and talking about it. And then we're giving community members access to tools, resources, and assets that they can use to then go champion it within their own communities. They can take this information, they can go talk to their legislators, they can go talk to school boards, they can talk and voice their opinions to their own, community leaders, and make sure that they continue to advocate. So I think storytelling around advocacy, which is something that I actually just recently did. I was in DC this past June at the United Nations Association's annual leadership summit, and I led a workshop on storytelling and advocacy communications. And this was specifically so that people are empowered to have the resources and tools they need to communicate, to confront crises in their communities, and be able to use storytelling to help move things in a positive direction.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to follow up on the library piece. It's powerful, your comments. So thank you so much for that. I'm interested in, just on a personal level, obviously ALA sort of standing for access. Just tell us about like a book that you've read either recently or just a favorite that you're like, recommend, hey, if you guys haven't read this, you should.
So one of the books I would recommend that was just released in June of 2024 is The Truth About Immigrants. And it's by Zeke Hernandez. And it's packed with data and information specifically on how immigrants benefit the economy. It's tied to immigration and economics. I am almost through it. I'm listening to it on Audible. And it's been, really eye-opening, and talk about arming you with the data and information to go out there and then tell your stories. That is a great book that I recommend reading. And for me, again, as we're on the topic of uplifting the refugee community, one of the books I read a while ago is Malala Yousafzai's book, We Are Displaced. That was a really great, insightful book that centers around girls' education specifically. So that one really called out to my heart as well.
You mentioned Malala, and I always talk about her famous quote, "Education is our only solution." Actually, is Malala's quote. So, Chris, now we are talking about storytelling, that many of my audience are international people. They're not American. When anytime when I send the previous episode to them, or they listen to our podcast, they don't talk about my part. They all of them are so interested in your story. Yes, storytelling matters. They are so inspired, impressed by your story when you share your background, or anytime. It's very interesting that that really storytelling can change mind, or open eyes, open minds. Yeah, and honestly, because you are my friend, I never thought, okay, your story is really impactful to many people.
You
So,
took it for granted.
yeah, I took it for granted. Do you know why? Because you are from here. Okay, you are from here. You are part of the majority. Like, your life is a normal life, but many of people over there, they realize, no, your normal life is not normal life as well. So yeah, it's interesting that the story, how storytelling is important and impactful. And yesterday you mentioned that this is about migrants issues. You said this is not a policy issue; it's about human rights. Yeah, and I think one of the powerful part of storytelling is remind us that all of us are human. All of us are human, and when we share, when we share our stories, our personal stories, one piece, it's important for me that you know I talk about some suffer. Okay, and people can feel that suffer, that pain, and I can receive sympathy, empathy for them. And also, I saw other side of storytelling as well. Okay, I saw some people. I share my stories. I share my stories. For example, I share why I changed my name in this country. I I used to be Muhammad Ali. When I arrived here, everybody started calling me Muhammad, because in Iran we don't have kind of first name, middle name. No, okay. So Muhammad Ali is a name, but my parents always call me Ali. I said, okay, Muhammad, that's fine. But 2016, with the new administration in White House, I really felt insecure, and I lived with fear, because a couple of times happened. People started questioning me about my beliefs. Well, I didn't want to talk about my beliefs only based on my name, because Muhammad. So Muhammad is from probably Middle East, one of the Middle Eastern countries. So this person probably believed that religion. So they started questioning me, and I started, I found myself in different position, situation that I had to explain my beliefs. So then I thought, I felt like I don't want to deal with that. Still, after 12 years, people ask me, do you eat pork or not? Do you drink or not? So, but, you know, one time I was sharing this story why I just, remove Muhammad. Okay, I go by Ali, just Ali Sharifi Tarokh. And that person told me, make sure you don't have your backpack, so that, because of that background, some I don't want to explain it that much, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen so many people, even when we share the stories with them, okay, open discussion, that reminds me of that French queen. This is in history. They told her, hey, people are in the street, are doing the revolution, and she asked why. Okay, and they said, people are asking for bread, because we don't have bread to eat, and she said, go tell them eat cake. Eat cake, So yeah.
But there is, storytelling, right? I think it's what, as a person of faith, right? Like, that is the single biggest draw to the why I hold the worldview I hold is the stories that you read throughout ancient history, told by many of our sort of religious leaders, and I think that's just underscores the power not only to change narratives and open the door to dialogue, but stories sort of stand the test of time. And I think that is a really powerful piece that they're highly memorable and they sort of last generationally.
Absolutely.
One of the things I would love to, we spent a good deal of time talking about, advocating for women and the work that you're doing. I would love to hear if you could say, like, just tell us about a woman in your life that's like a mentor, a model, a role model, a hero, whatever you want to hero. Maybe not, but in your life that you could maybe share with us.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to cite my mom. She has certainly shaped who I am today. And, I commend her sacrifices and compromises she's made to ensure that my brother and I have every need met, and that we, one thing I'll say, when I said before that when she said she wishes she had a choice, but at the same time, she has no regret, because she said, I raised two wonderful human beings and we always had her. We came home to her. She was there. She met all of our needs. And so for me, my mom, first and foremost, is the biggest pillar of heroism in my life. But there are so many women who have contributed to my makeup, my value system, and they range from the women I've worked for. So one of the things we didn't discuss about my background is that I spent about a decade working in the sports industry before I moved on to Navy Pier, where I was there for about 6 years, leading the marketing and communications department there. But I spent a decade working in the sports industry, and entering, I was so excited. I thought how great this is going to be able to do something fun that I love and enjoy. And I definitely wanted to go in journalism because, like I said, storytelling has always been important to me. And I wanted to deliver the news of the day that everyone was excited to hear. So that's kind of why I went into it. I was quickly jarred by, I think I kind of went into it very, just rose-colored glasses, thinking it was going to be great. And then faced a lot of, unfortunately, discrimination, gender-based discrimination, sexual harassment, and all of these things that start to, pile up. And oftentimes in all the workplaces I worked at, I wouldn't be invited to the table for discussions, or oftentimes they would think I don't know what I'm talking about. And in fact, when I did, discuss the game of the night and mention the stats, some guys would turn to me and go, "Oh, you actually know what you're talking about," which they would never say to my male counterparts. So things like this kept happening, and it started to, like, one by one, shatter my confidence. Then I got to Navy Pier, and for the first time in my entire career, I worked for a woman. She was my first female boss ever. And on my very first day, I'm sitting at, we had a team meeting that she did on a weekly basis, but we're sitting around a table, and it's a huge team. And at one point, they're discussing the new Navy Pier Ferris wheel and the 100th anniversary in 2016, and all these, brainstorming all these ideas. And she goes, "Payal, what do you think?" And I was like, What? And she's like, "I want to hear what you think. I feel like you have expertise from a communication standpoint. No one had ever seen me in a room before. No one had ever invited my voice the way that she did." And I get emotional thinking about it, because Amy Cowan, that's her name, was the first person to say, "Absolutely, you belong here." And then I even began that sentence with, "Well, this is kind of a stupid idea." And she's like, "That's how the best ones start." She's like, "Let's hear it." And it just takes one person like that to believe in you, to have faith in you, to invite you to a conversation, to just change your entire dynamic. So bosses like her, and the ones that followed after her, Leslie Cheers, Tammy Chase, Michelle Boone, they all contributed to the confidence I have today, the way I show up in the workplace. And then the women I served on the UN Women Board with, they're some of my best friends to this day. And, on the days when entrepreneurship is beating me down, they're the ones who are like, "Get back up. You've got this. we're championing you all the way. And I can't tell you anything that's more powerful than that.
Thank you. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for all your support. So she reminded me of Carlos, our second guest. Carlos was our second guest here, and he said, everybody needs a crease, right, to get into another crease. So yeah, Chris is my boss too,
Okay.
and Rebecca is my boss. So they created so many opportunities for me. Yeah.
We all need champions in our corner.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rebecca. But now I have a question. So first, you didn't share about your audience and their feedback about me and my story. My people love your story. I don't know about your people.
They're all our people.
Okay, so but you didn't share. I assume maybe they couldn't understand my accent, right?
Is that a question?
Yeah,
You asking?
I'm asking you.
Oh. So we're going to give live
that-
reactions of what people think about the pod. So drop us a line. Tell us exactly what you think about Ali. Don't tell them. Do not tell anyone what you think about me. I know, Ali, right? Like, people love hearing from you, and everyone can understand you. You don't have to
Oh, okay.
I
I'm always
understand
worried
that.
about my accent.
I know, but it's part of you, and it's a beautiful part of you. And I think, no, it's great. And candidly, in a lot of the circles I'm in, you might be the first, Persian person that people really feel like they get to know, and they're like, wow, this is really, really cool. And I'm like, wait till they hear that you're supposed to eat rice with a spoon, and then you'll really get into it. So it's been a joy.
Okay,
Thanks for
thank
sharing
you.
it.
So now my question is, I think Justin Trudeau, his first cabinet, I don't know, it was 2012. I don't remember. So he chose his cabinet exactly equal. I think 12 female, 12 male. I if I'm not mistaken, but it was real even. So then a journalist asked him, why? What is your reason? Why, we are always talking about, people get position based on merit. Okay, who is the best has to get that role. Then he answered that it's very easy because we are in, I don't know, 2012. I don't remember that year. Okay, imagine because we are in 2024. So this is my question for both of you. Okay, why? I have my own answer. Okay, why we need to bring women, okay, and give them more chance and opportunity, okay, in our field. Okay, we need to bring women with lived expertise and experience. Why it matters? Why if it goes to the marketplace, it has to be based on merit. Who is the most competent person can get that role? Okay, why in 2024 we must secure some leadership roles for women in our field? Okay, we refugee women or women with lived expertise.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, the simple answer is because women and girls make up half of the population, right? So that's the simple answer. And why they need to be in positions of leadership, especially, is because, so like in government, for example, if you can't have the right policies if the people that are impacted are not at the table, right? So a lot of what we were talking about today, if we want to see change, those people need to be a part of that conversation. They need to be part of the decision-making process, part of the policy-making process. So, it's obviously it's no wonder that there are not free period products in bathrooms, and that's not government enforced or mandated, because for a long time, women were not serving in those positions. So as men, a lot of men are not thinking about this. Why should they? That's not something that impacts them. But this is why there needs to be women at the table. And then we're talking about caregiving. We talked about, right, even child care. So for the women that want to go to work but have to balance being a mother and caregiving for a child, or even a parent, an elder parent, or anyone in their lives, there are a lot of policies that are not in place to help with that. And there are not a lot of policies within HR constructs and systems in the workplace. the tide is once again still changing, but slowly. And I think once you have women in leadership positions, these discussions can happen, and then we can make progress. So to answer your question on a basic level, it's because our government, our economic makeup, we need to make sure that it is reflective of the people that it is serving, and it is in service to the entire community.
How about you?
So I'm probably so I believe in meritocracy, and I do not believe in hiring on the basis of attributes. Right? I'm not a believer in that at all. I think it's actually a little bit offensive to say I am going to be prescriptive in who I hire. So I will not approach it that way. And that's a philosophical answer. I'm a big believer in meritocracy, meaning the person that is best suited to the job, based on the assessment of the folks making that decision, is the person that I'm going to hire and advocate for. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't address the real issue that I see is when people view meritocracy through a very narrow lens. And in order to, I think, be fair and equitable, you have to understand that the funnel isn't actually open to everyone. And so the people that you may even attract, that is exclusive by definition. So unless you are putting equal amounts of work into ensuring that your hiring pool is representative of the population, a meritocracy is in fact a bad idea. But I think what we try and do is say, let's ensure that through our recruiting and through our hiring efforts that we have a diverse candidate pool. And then I think it is actually the most dignified thing to do a fair and equitable assessment of the skills and merits of the individuals you're interviewing, and then you hire the best fit for the job. And I think that is how I approach that. And I think I think the question of yes, you of course need women in leadership. You need women on your board. You need, just like you need all members of different communities to provide the holistic view of things. But I do want to caution, because you've seen a little bit of a pull back and a little bit of a retraction on some of these key issues that need advancement, like workplace equity and pay equality, and because of this sort of oversimplification that we're hiring because you're a woman. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-hmm. We are not hiring you because you are a woman. We are hiring you on the basis of
you're the most qualified.
You're the most qualified. And I think that's the pace that people who try and leverage this the wrong way, they sort of oversimplify it. So I just wanted to be cautious that I believe it's a meritocracy and that's the right way to run a business and run an organization. But your people and culture departments, your executives have a mandate to ensure your hiring pool is representative of the population, and that if you're not interviewing a diverse audience for a position, you're in fact doing it wrong.
Okay, thank you. So definitely there is no right or wrong answer to this question. But when I was in Iran, I was a political activist promoting human rights, democratic values, and I was, my mindset was exactly like yours now. We are promoting women's rights, women and men are equal, and let's go based on merit. And until I arrived here, for the first time, I found myself in a minority position. So when I was in Iran, in my entire life, I was part of majority. I was blind. I couldn't see many issues. While I was so proud I'm an activist. But for the first time, I found myself in a minority position. And I realized I need, that invisible hand to boost me, to open more opportunities. When we are in the structure, we are in the society, systematically keep part of the population behind. okay, by 100 years, 200 years, whatever. Okay, then now, okay, in 21st century, okay, we pass so many laws on the paper, men and women are equal, whatever, but historically they are behind. And I believe we are, as social service providers or activists, we need to create that opportunity, even if it's not fair to many people. Okay, but that unfairness, it's based on kind of I maybe not justice, but we need to do that. Okay, to empower women and also underserved communities. And unfortunately, in our field, the social services field is predominated by women. When it comes to refugee and immigrant field, you don't. It's barely find you can find a women with lived expertise and experience at the leadership level. Okay, who have power to hire and fire and make decision. Okay, it's very very rare. You cannot. I don't know. I can count maybe in Chicago maybe 4 or 5. Okay, but in general, unfortunately, even in our field, there we don't have so many women leader with lived expertise. Yeah.
Um, Agreed. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We absolutely do. Well, I know we've gotten a lot of your time, and thank you. I would love if we can sort of wrap things up with a story, and however you want to take that. But we've spent some time talking about the importance of communication, and the mechanism by which we do that is to tell stories, and those leave a lasting impression. So on any topic, doesn't have to be necessarily something directly discussed today, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing a story that has meant a lot to you with us and our audience.
Okay, I guess I'll tell the story of my very first crisis that I've ever managed. I was leading the communications for a soccer team, and one of the players who was he came from Africa, as a Black immigrant, and he this was a game between Chicago and Milwaukee, which those get very contentious because those are rivals, right? And Milwaukee fans were in attendance, and so this player is playing for Chicago. Throughout the game, of course, heckling happens, and fans tend to, try to get under the skin of the opponents. And so that's usually expected in sports. But this one particular fan took things too far and was shouting racial slurs at him, making monkey noises every time he had the ball. And it was very audible. You can hear this in the vicinity. People were even looking around like, I can't believe this is happening. The refs chose not to do anything about it. We're not clear if they fully heard it. They said they didn't. But anyway, the game's going on. This player is holding back his emotions. He can hear it happening. And so can his teammates, who would, during little breaks here and there, would just pat him on the back. And as soon as the buzzer went off to signal the end of the game, he jumped the stands and confronted this fan, and it resulted in a chase around the arena and back down to the field. And everyone in the stadium is stunned. Like, for those who had no context, they just saw this deranged player chasing this guy and then getting into a physical altercation with him. They were separated by security, and he was escorted to the locker room. And everyone turns and looks at me and goes, "Good luck." Because of course we were met with a lot of anger, disappointment. Of course, this is there's families there, there are kids there, and so now we have parents calling and the phone's ringing off the hook. Like, we'll never bring our family to a game again, because if your players just jump into stands and chase people, like, what if that next one is my son or daughter? So there were calls for boycott. We immediately, had a discussion with the team ownership and the coach and management and all of that. And everyone in that room unanimously was like, we're just going to stay quiet. It'll pass. We sweep this under the rug. Now, everything within my training and expertise and my natural instincts was like, this is wrong. Absolutely not. We cannot just sweep this under the rug. So I pushed back, and this was my first ever pushback to an authoritative, figure in my workplace. And I said, I disagree with the strategy. I think we need to confront this head on. We need to make a statement. We also need to go speak to him and talk to him about like what happened, to get the full story, and then go from there and make a decision. And they're like, okay, if this doesn't work, you're going to be fired. And I was like, I'm willing to take that risk. So I went and found the player sitting outside the locker room with his head in his hands, and he looks up and he's crying. He's got tears coming down his face. And he looks at me and goes, I'm so sorry. Something in me snapped. He was, saying this all game long. And I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We cannot ever condone violence, ever, right? That's step one. We need to put out a statement saying that what he did was wrong. No matter what the context or the situation is, we never condone violence. That's never the appropriate response. And then I called a press conference and had him, stand there at a podium and first and foremost apologize. But then I told him, tell your story. Tell your story of how you came here from another country to pursue your love, your passion, right? You wanted to come here and play soccer. That was your dream. And then to be met with words that were incredibly painful, with racial slurs and these, sounds and everything, and go ahead and get emotional, and he stood there and he did. Again, tears in his eyes. And every reporter started to also tear up. Next thing you know, all these outlets are reporting, instead of focusing on the fact that there was a physical altercation, they made the story an uplifting story about this man's journey and how discrimination exists in sports and how we as fans need to do better. The next game, we had a 33% spike in attendance, with people coming with signs that said, we're with you, we stand with you. He wasn't playing because we had to penalize him, of course. And so he was in a suit sitting behind the bench. And he stood up and waved, and it was met with like a roar of support. So once again, when you tell stories and you do it with authenticity and a raw approach, and you're really true to who you are and what happened to you, people will resonate, and it'll create positive outcomes. So that's why I got into crisis management, because I saw there's power in being able to reframe something and change the outcome.
I love that.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. I was getting emotional.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ali, anything you have before I wrap things up?
No, I was just curious about your favorite food in Chicago.
Oh, my favorite food. Okay. I'm a big fan of Thai food, but my favorite place is actually not in Chicago. But what I will say is I love my favorite Italian spot, Piccolo Sogno, and I love their little garden patio. So that's one of my favorite places I like to frequent. And Chicago is just rich in dining experience and diverse dining experiences that I love. I love that about living in Chicago, that we can try different foods from different places.
Right. And you tell me you don't eat your rice with fork.
I do not eat my rice with fork, no. I do not. Actually, growing up, we, Indians are known for eating with your hands.
Yeah, it's part of Iran. Southern Iran, they use their hand.
But these days, it's a spoon.
Yeah.
Yes. Mind blown.
Like every other American. Payal, thank you so much.
Yes.
And I love hearing your background. I know everyone will be enriched by hearing your passion, the work you're doing, and your talent in storytelling and the work you're doing professionally. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that with us today. For those that are watching and will want to connect with you, we'll make sure we link all of your socials and your site there so they can reach out to you and follow along in the important work you're doing. And
thank you both for the opportunity and the platform to share my stories.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Our Stories and joining the conversation. To learn more about the podcast or get in touch, you can visit us at ourstoriespodcast.com or find us on social media. Our Stories is recorded in Chicago and co-produced by Trellus and Flex Tech AI. We'll see you next time.